I don't know why Netanyahu said what he said, and I don't know what his considerations were, whether they were political or operational. Ask him why he said that, Kirby said. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday walked back from a private understanding with the Biden administration and distanced himself from the proposal for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon presented by U.S. and France. Wow. I'm so shocked. Wow. Wow. Why would he? You have taught him that like he can get away with anything he wants to get away with. Sirens in Tel Aviv? Wait, what? Tons of rockets. According to the Israeli Telegram, the launches may originate from Yemen. Holy sirens in Tel Aviv. The Ansar Allah regime is launching strikes into Tel Aviv, apparently. Is it actually not shit missiles? It probably is. The difference, however, is that they have in the past been able to send in like shit missiles like into Israel. Iran collabed with Russia to arm Houthi rebels with Russian rockets. Exclusive. Iran brokering talks to send advanced Russian missiles to Yemen's Houthis. Bro, this is the type of shit I don't understand. Like, does Russia even have the bandwidth? Russia should probably worry about his own his own situation. You know what I mean? Millions of Israelis are running to shelter as sirens sound across all of central Israel. One thing I would like to remind everyone is that number one, they have missile. Obviously, they have like shelters to run to. Second thing is that they have the Iron Dome and numerous other interception systems that are very effective. And number three, the way you will hear Israelis talk about this when I remember yesterday and the day prior how they talked about like the Lebanese population, it rings a little hollow. I ultimately don't want any civilian to die, obviously. I have a very strict anti-human casualty policy in terms of my own moral compass here. But one thing to always consider is that, I know, brave take, which is weird because it is somewhat of a brave take in the current world affairs. It's just that it's strange how they can so actively petition and celebrate wanton death and destruction against the Lebanese civilian population. Do live updates. Netanyahu vows to keep up strikes as Hezbollah as U.S. pushes for a ceasefire. The Israeli leader arriving in New York City for the UN General Assembly said, "We continue to hit Hezbollah with all our might." He added, "This is the policy." Dude, he's in America. Just arrest him, please. Like, he's literally inside of New York, the Tel Aviv of America. Just lock his bitch ass up, dude. Just serve the warrant. Stop pushing the ICC and threatening the ICC with whatever kind of legal or illegal means that you will engage with them if they do follow through on this arrest warrant. Let the arrest warrant go through. Arrest him. You will become heroes globally. It appears a missile fire from Yemen broke up over central Israel. However, the IDF will likely confirm what occurred. A better angle showing what appears to be the breakup of the missile.
هيوم في السماء هيوم ضربوا نزل هذا بتلتلوا.
It appears the missile fire from Yemen broke up over central Israel. However, the IDF will likely confirm. Why hasn't the ICC done it yet? What do you think? Every other week there's another article that comes out that no one gives a shit about, that no one pays attention to, that's like, they are threatening our lives if we file this arrest warrant. Like every other week there's another article on the British prosecutor or I don't know, the actual courts, where there'll be another article about how America is trying to pressure all of the other international partners in stopping the ICC from conducting this this arrest application, pushing forward with this arrest application. Yeah. The United States is basically weekly doing prank phone calls and real phone calls giving loose death threats to the ICC if they go through with this arrest warrant. The missile launched from Yemen was successfully intercepted by an Arrow interceptor, which means it was like a ballistic missile and not just like some baby munitions. The alarms and explosions that were heard, like not it wasn't like some low-level shit, right? Because Arrow is for the big boys. The alarms and explosions that were heard are the results of interception process and the interception fragments. It would have been a medium-range ballistic missile. Thank you, Elant, our missile expert. Any missile from Yemen requires an Arrow or a Patriot, so $6 million spent at minimum. Cha-ching. What is the news about the ground assault? I don't know. Anybody know what sort of payload that could have carried? I don't have no idea. But what I do know is yesterday, Barak Ravid was reporting that there was going to be a possible ceasefire, and that the ceasefire in Lebanon, by the way, not in Gaza, and that the Americans were going to come out and say that there was a possible ceasefire in Lebanon, a temporary one, and that Benjamin Netanyahu was going to come out with a big reveal, a big announcement. This was happening while I had the Blowback Boys on. I didn't pay much attention to it, partially because I didn't think that it was going to actually pull through. And yes, lo and behold, it did not. Anti-Materia, thank you for the 10 community gift to subs. I personally do not understand how, we're going to get back to the Eric Adams stuff in a second, but I just don't understand like why Bibi thinks that he will be able to do a successful ground invasion. I don't understand that. I also don't understand why Americans think that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to listen to their demands when they actually accompany said stern warnings with like $9 billion in weapons transfers. Obviously, nobody gives a shit in that situation. They don't give a fuck. Why would Benjamin Netanyahu stop his relentless attacks on Lebanon? Why would he stop his relentless attacks on Gaza? Why would he stop at all when there is virtually nothing stopping him? Every single time America says, hey, don't do this, they also then go, here, we're signing off on another multiple billion-dollar fucking weapons transfer. It's like, it makes no sense. Yeah, of course they're not going to stop. They do not want him to stop, man. I don't understand why they do not want him to stop. Okay, you are delusional. He's doing exactly what they want him to do until they no longer need him. Then they will use the crimes they ordered him to commit to throw him under the bus. I know. I understand this as well. Okay, I understand this as well. The problem is, if they don't stop him and he does go into Lebanon, the diaper brigade is going to get up as it has in the past. This is what I mean. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't like make any tactical military sense unless he believes that like the American government is going to send troops alongside the Israeli military to defend the diaper brigade. Are ground invasions safer for civilians than the bombing campaigns they do? There are never any instances where the Israeli diaper force is doing ground invasions without mass bombing campaigns. They will not go into an area unless they have literally reduced it to fucking rubble. So no. It's funny because there's one guy who was also mentioned in the ICC indictments, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who has also looked at this with cold and calculating eyes and has been like, we cannot invade Lebanon. That guy is on his way out. That's what's so like weird about the process, is that like the only people who are still just as bloodthirsty, but at least like a little bit more reasonable about the prowess of the military, are people who they're calling pussies and woke and gay. It doesn't make any sense. Why does America not stop Israel? Do you think there's a practical reason for what Israel is doing, or is it just Zionist brain rot? No, I think it's Zionist brain rot. The thing is, guys, empires die. There are many examples of this throughout history, and we read it after the fact and we go, oh, how could they not have foreseen this? Fascist governments end up losing, right? If you want to go closer in history, look at Nazi Germany. And there are many tactical errors that they engage with in the process. And obviously, when you read after the fact, you're like, how the fuck did they make this mistake? Why did they push so far into Russia? Things like that, right? And obviously, there are probably still at the time reasonable minds that look at the situation and go, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. NSIG is a mistake. I'm sure there were people that were like looking at the situation outside and having a more reasonable approach. And they're like, nah, we're not going to do that. We're actually going, tits out all the way. And I think that's partially what it is. The message that Biden's advisors received from Dermer is that Netanyahu thinks that a temporary ceasefire is the right thing because he does not want to be dragged into a ground invasion that could lead to entanglement and erode the achievements of the IDF has achieved so far. Yeah, but he's also publicly stated, no, the fuck, I'm not going to do that. Blinken facing calls to resign. Yeah, but it's not going to happen. Israel continues to play with the U.S. Dude, I was listening to Ezra Klein talk to that one journalist who wrote like a biopic of Yahya Sinwar. And I don't know why. I just have, maybe it's like parasocial. Maybe this is what happens when you just like consume the content of a person too much. But like, I've recently found myself liking Ezra Klein more, which is embarrassing to admit. Obviously, before I, arrived at his conclusion on Israel stuff. And it's like, I expected more from Ezra Klein, because I guess thought that he would be smarter about it. But in any case, it was still a very informative article because like the dude really scoured. Ezra Klein is a former Vox and now New York Times journalist / slash host of a New York Times podcast. I was actually supposed to be on his podcast, but he has some good takes, he has some bad takes. It is what it is. But I do see him as like a much smarter individual than like the average American journalist. So I think for that reason, I expect him to be a little bit more reasonable on Israel. And he is like, I guess, more reasonable than the average like rabid sociopath. He's not like an ultra Zionist or anything. But anyway, the conversation was informative regardless. It was informative because like I didn't know this. Yahya Sinwar wrote a book, and apparently they took the book off of Amazon when October 7 happened. But like this guy found the book, the journalist he was talking to, and it's really interesting because like I knew that he spoke fluent Hebrew. I had heard the common Israeli sentiment about Yahya Sinwar was that like he understands Israelis better than the Israelis understand him. He's obviously very smart. Like he is a very, very, very smart dude. And, you know, good or bad, I'm not saying, I'm not making like a moral analysis on this, but yeah, I'm not making a value judgment. So he's literally a victim and a monster they created. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Some of the things that they mentioned over and over again in that conversation was, oh yeah, I love this tweet from Will Menaker. I thought it was really funny. Since Ta-Nehisi Coates doesn't speak Hebrew or Arabic, because Ta-Nehisi Coates also wrote like a blistering article in the New Yorker, I believe, where he was like, what the fuck are we doing with this Israel shit? Y'all are crazy. I went there. It was terrifying. It was literally apartheid. And I was so wrong. Remember, I talked about Ta-Nehisi Coates' like change of attitude towards Israel because like he wrote about Israel in really positive ways back when he was talking about reparations, making an argument about how he personally believes that like Germany paying reparations to Israel was a fantastic thing, and it can be done here in the United States of America in similar ways for the black population here. But after visiting Israel, specifically the West Bank, he was like, oh my God, I was so wrong to use Israel as a positive example. It is actually a very negative example. Holy shit, it is literally an apartheid. These are human atrocities that are happening in front of our eyes that we are party to. He even gave a speech apologizing vociferously over and over again about like all the times that he has like talked about Israel in a positive manner. But there were some really, really good points in the article. He says that it was complicated. He now understood was horseshit. Complicated was how he described slavery. How people describe slavery and then segregation is complicated, he said, when you want to take something from somebody. Yeah, the Israeli doctor, yeah, the dentist. This is the Yahya Sinwar was homies with the Israeli dentist and like would talk to him and shit. Anyway, this guy actually interviewed him too, the guy that Ezra was talking to. I thought it was an interesting piece overall. I think it hyper focuses a little bit too much. Like it still falls into the same Zionist trappings of never really ascribing like a genuine need of emancipation to the enemy, right? And thinking like, oh, he's a great, like it falls under the great man theory almost a little too much, where he's like, oh, Yahya Sinwar's like personal ambition is because he wanted to be the real the leader that like saves the Palestinians. Like his ambitions were not cold and calculated, and instead, yeah, here it is. In an Israeli prison infirmary, a Jewish dentist came to the aid of a desperately ill Hamas inmate. Years later, the prisoner became a mastermind of the October attack. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a neoliberal, which is why he had to see it in his own eyes and connect it with an individual level instead of, say, a materialist and Marxist person critical perspective who could arrive at this thought of analysis what Israel is doing in its historical context. Yes, Ezra Klein is a very idealistic lib, and I think that's why he gets stuck on Israel as a homeland for Jewish folks. Yeah, but he's still like a human, you know what I mean? He's not as like bloodless as the rest of the media brigade, in the sense that like it's obvious that like when he went to the West Bank, he was like, this shit is really fucked up. Anyway, we're jumping from Ta-Nehisi Coates back to Ezra Klein, but you know, I think it is a very human reaction. Like going to the West Bank and seeing it with your own two fucking eyes, and then turning around and still maintaining the idea that like Israel is a fucking beautiful, moral, peaceful nation and not a bloody apartheid regime that is genocidal and hell-bent on death and destruction. That I think shows like what kind of human you are to me. Oh, also it was a friend of the show, Rana Kalik, and her yelling at fucking Ta-Nehisi Coates back in the day that played a role in pushing him to look more deeply into Palestine. I was the woman who yelled in the mic about Palestine and I got shouted down at his event with Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, obviously, Ta-Nehisi would never be able to write for Jeffrey Goldberg's outlet if he fucking was an anti-apartheid, anti-Zionist activist. And now, after years and years of writing at The Atlantic, like, he has recognized what was right and what was wrong and has moved beyond that point and moved beyond that position. He goes, I was at the 6th and synagogue in 6th and 1 synagogue in DC in 2014. That was really hard to do. I remember being very nervous about saying what I said. I'm so proud I did. If anyone's reading knows Ta-Nehisi, please tell him thank you for listening and his willingness to learn and speak out. This is from his Evolution on Palestine, from the New York Magazine article, The Return of Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates is also a very important thinker because, like, his writings were you know, cherished and celebrated by the likes of Barack Obama, by the way. So it's not like he is at the heart of liberal intelligentsia, okay? These are the types of people who a lot of these liberals in positions of power read and get notes from. So when he comes out and says something like this, and the New York Magazine is writing about shit like this, I'll be honest with you, this is like an unimaginable change of pace from the liberal intelligentsia, which is normally, and still very much so, incredibly up the asshole of the State Department overall. So it is definitely a sea change, an attitude shift in an environment that you would not necessarily expect. I think, like, New York Magazine has done a pretty decent job with this, with the Isaac Chodemer reporting over and over again. Isaac Chodemer, obviously chodemously for the New York Magazine, will you know, do these like insane fucking interviews with people where he, yes, Chodener. I love when people are not afraid to change their opinions with new information. Yeah, this is the article, by the way. I mean, this guy's like written comics and shit, obviously, but now he's like back. He wrote a nonfiction called The Message, and there is all this stuff about like his attitude change. This is a really good, I would say it's a really good piece overall. I read a lot of it. The first inkling that Coates might want to write about Israel came around the time he was leaving The Atlantic. It was partly spurred by the criticism he received over a passage, The Case for Reparations, in which he cited reparations paid by the German government to the state of Israel after the Holocaust as a potential model. We did an event where the case for reparations came out at a synagogue in DC, and I remember there was a woman who got on the mic and yelled about the role of Palestinians in that article. He told me, and I couldn't quite understand what she was saying. I mean, I heard her, but I literally could not understand it. She got shouted down, and I've thought about that a lot. Man, I've thought about that a lot. It hadn't occurred to him that Israel might itself be in the debt of a population that it had oppressed, a blind spot that remains a source of regret to this day. I should have asked more questions, he told me. I should have done more. I should have looked around and said, do we have anybody Palestinian who's going to read this before we print it? That woman was friend of the show, Reina Khalek. Now, I do think it's great that, you know, there is this change of mind happening. And I do personally believe that Ta-Nehisi Coates had a genuine change of mind, because Ta-Nehisi Coates is exactly the type of person that could make a fantastic career already and continue to basically keep churning out like similar statements, never really talk about Israel at all. That kid at Columbia, they are more morally correct than some motherfuckers that have won the Pulitzer Prize and National Magazine Awards. Please, God, let this represent some sort of tipping point for mainstream American coverage on this decades-long horror. Yeah, here are some good lines from it, where he said that it was complicated with respect to Israel. He now understood was horseshit. Complicated was how people had described slavery and then segregation. It's complicated, he said, when you want to take something from somebody. It's not like Arthur Schulzberger is rubbing his hands together and dictating pro-Israeli coverage, Coates continued, noting that the Times had recently published a mammoth investigation into how Jewish extremists had taken over the Israeli state. It's that in the total coverage, in all of the talk of experts and sound bites of politicians and dispatches of credentialed reporters, a sense of ambiguity is allowed to prevail. The fact of the matter is, he said, that kid at Columbia, whatever dumb shit they're saying, whatever slogan I would not say they would use, they are more morally correct than some motherfuckers that have won Pulitzer Prizes and National Magazine Awards and are the most decorated and powerful journalists. What matters to Coates is not what will happen to his career now, to the script sales, invitations from the White House, his relationships with the former colleagues at The Atlantic and elsewhere. I'm not worried, he told me, shrugging his shoulders. I have to do what I have to do. I'm sad, but I was so enraged. If I went over there and saw what I saw and didn't write it, I am fucking worthless. So he does demonstrate some semblance of humanity in this situation. It's ironic because, like, this is why I say your background matters. This is why I say diversity matters, right? If you are sheltered from the truth, regardless of how credentialed and how celebrated of an academic and a reporter you are when speaking to black liberation in this country, okay? And Ta-Nehisi Coates is one of the foremost experts, right, in terms of making an argument for reparations or speaking to like the way that the dynamic ways in which white supremacy has been played a formative role in American societal development. Ultimately, he was incredibly sheltered from the truth. So someone who is that credentialed can still be incredibly sheltered from the truth. I need you to understand. Maybe I'm misreading, but did he mention rubbing hands together to point out that he's obviously not being anti-Semitic, or did he just not realize the optics? No, he's saying like he's speaking to the anti-Semitic tendencies in like he's speaking to the anti-Semitism like the anti-Semitic canard that like, ooh, a Jewish man, a Jewish editor is like, you know, rubbing his hands together to be like, yeah, let's pump out pro-Israeli pieces. Now, here is the problem. His neoliberalism still stunts his imagination. What do I mean by this? Because he is still a liberal at the end of the day, but a liberal can see right and wrong and use his own personal development, his own personal experiences as a black man growing up in America, and all of the things that he knows about the black American history to see what the fuck is going on, to see the parallels, the glaringly obvious parallels with respect to Palestinians and their treatment under Israeli occupation. Having said that, however, why do I think his neoliberalism stunts his imagination? Because Arthur Schulzberger is not rubbing his hands together, obviously. Having said that, however, the New York Times is like pro-Israeli coverage is obvious, and he does a decent job of like interrogating and examining that. But what he fails to mention here is that the stuff about Jewish extremists taking over the Israeli state is also within the permissible confines of like there is still an element of Zionism associated with that. And even if it wasn't, because I have friends that are fantastic fucking journalists at the New York Times, right? And their coverage is relegated to like the back of the newspaper, but they serve a very important purpose. And that important purpose is to maintain a veneer of credibility, because you as a newspaper cannot actually get people to read your newspaper and think I'm going to unconditionally believe whatever the fuck I'm seeing on this newspaper. If you don't do that, the moment that you drop the veneer, the moment that you drop your credibility, and the New York Times credibility is in pieces at this moment due to all the things that he's mentioning, they lose the formative role they play. And I think that is the reason why they do these pieces in general. I think that there is a sinister purpose behind writing about like Jewish extremists taking over the Israeli state. One, it is still within the confines of like liberal Zionism. Oh, it's actually the Jewish extremists, the Jewish supremacists that have taken over the state, and it's not necessarily like the entire cultural attitude towards Palestinians that has just devastated Israeli consciousness. And beyond that, no, it's not a few bad eggs. I think they're still saying that like those few rotten eggs have actually spoiled the bunch. But the problem is, it still doesn't dive into the fundamental issue, the fundamental problem at the heart of this settler colonial occupation, that it is a settler colonial occupation. I'm fine with it as long as it still is moving in the direction of the abolition of the apartheid. I'm still okay with that. But having said that, I do recognize the sinister purpose that these sorts of pieces that go against the narrative that New York Times is unconditionally pro-Israel serve. It is so that people like Ta-Nehisi Coates go, see, they're obviously not that biased. If they were, then they wouldn't cover the Jewish extremists that have taken over the Israeli state. So in your opinion, is there some sort of editor or style guide? I mean, it's the editorial team, it's the style guide, it's everything. Anyway, only if your moral code calls for denying Jews the right of self-determination. Oh my God. This is such a tired old idea, dude. You cannot engage in settler colonialism and then couch that and masquerade that kind of sentiment with like a liberal permission structure. This is why I always say like the ultra-Zionists are more honest. They are. They're violent, they're bloodthirsty, but they're fucking honest. They're honest about the violence that they want to deal. To be fair, she might be an ultra-Zionist as well. This is using the aesthetics of liberal language to genuinely make an ultra-nationalist, ethno-supremacist argument. Jews' right to self-determination, if you are a liberal Zionist, still means that Jews have to dominate and be the ethnic majority in a land where they have violently cast out millions of Palestinians from. Do you understand? You cannot make a self-determination argument. It is the same exact principle behind America, okay? Are you telling me that the Anglo-Saxon does not have a right to self-determination? We must continue this settler colonial occupation, which also, at the other side of that, implies that we must continue the wholesale ethnic domination of the indigenous population on this land that came before us and kill all of them, which we did. That's what this is. It's ironic because like I always say, Zionism is inherently a fascist ideology. It is an ultranationalist ideology surrounding a religious and also ethnic lineage that is the in-group, and it requires the permanent domination of the out-group that is not a part of the ethnic in-group. Anyway, this alongside... No, Coates is not a Zionist. He used to be, but he is now, I think, a firm and committed voice in the anti-Zionist camp. This, alongside the fact that Bizan won an Emmy, in my opinion, spells an attitude shift in some of these institutions. I think there are more and more people who maybe even post October 7 were of a certain mind who now feel like the death toll is unconscionable and are slowly but surely, maybe quietly shifting their attitudes. There will always be naysayers. There are always going to be cultist, ride or die ultranationalists that will chirp about this sort of thing. But even when looking at the situation, I would say, 7 months ago, when the director, a direct descendant of the of Holocaust survivors, made Zone of Interest and won an Oscar for it and spoke out against Israel in his Oscar acceptance speech, because Zone of Interest was such a perfect parallel to how Israeli society currently operates. Zone of Interest, for those of you who don't know, was the story of Jonathan Glazer is the name of the director. It was the story of a person who was responsible for Auschwitz, and his Rudolf Höss, a real person, real evil individual who oversaw the countless amounts of executions of Jewish people in Auschwitz, and his day-to-day existence, basically showcasing not only the banality of evil, but also demonstrating that demonstrating how normal German society operated in the face of such gruesome acts of violence against the population that they had dehumanized, specifically Jewish people. And after his speech, the reason why I'm talking about Jonathan Glazer is because after Jonathan Glazer delivered that speech, there were so many people who fucking lost their minds. There were so many people that were yelling at him. They tried to launch a petition to cook his career. And even way back in the day, Antonio Bardem, right? Or Javier Bardem, sorry. And Penelope Cruz had come out years ago against the Israeli occupation, against the Israeli apartheid. And Hollywood obviously was like, you're fucking cooked for that, you piece of shit. And they got scolded into taking a wishy-washy, middle-of-the-ground approach. Javier Bardem recently spoke out against Israeli atrocities. That's the reason why I'm talking about. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is I think the societal attitude towards Israel's ongoing occupation and genocide is dramatically changing, even in areas where you normally would not expect it. These are institutions that are supposed to be firmly committed to upholding the American State Department interests. And this to me is a cultural shift inside of these institutions, akin to how the ICJ and the ICC has moved now against Israel. If Israel is an American state, and an important American state at that, it is akin to moving against the United States of America. This is something that I never would have imagined occurring. So these are, I guess, some silver linings to notice and recognize. Do you think if the USA continues to run interference and supply weapons, we will see any scrutiny from the ICJ? I think that will there be scrutiny towards the United States? No, that is for a different universe. The goal here is to apply pressure and to cause the United States of America to sever its connection to Israel and its unconditional loyalty it demonstrates to Israeli genocide and Israeli occupation by making it costly for the United States of America, taking away its power tools, taking away its soft power capabilities. That's what the role the ICC and ICJ play in this process. Because if the rule-based international order can no longer be wielded as a weapon by the American government for American interest, then all of a sudden, America's soft power capabilities diminish.